One of the greatest words that the Yiddish language has given to English is the word chutzpah. Chutzpah means audacity, a real cheek, and a degree of incredible self-confidence. Perhaps a good way of putting across what chutzpah is a man who kills his parents and then comes before the judge and pleads for clemency because he's an orphan. Or a great story of an example of how Jews understand the meaning of chutzpah is a story that I heard from Rav Pesach Krohn. There's a certain very wealthy individual in London whose home is absolutely open to mushulachim, to people who come to collect funds from Israel. They arrive in London and they know that they can go to this person's house, they can take a room, they can have something to eat, they can come for dinner. So it so happened that once one of these men, one of these mushulachim arrived in London. All he had was the number and the address of this very wealthy person. He didn't know even what he looked like. He had never met him before. So he took a taxi directly to this person's home, and he was shown in. I imagine there was a servant who showed him in and said, you can stay in this room, and dinner will be served at this time. And he came to dinner. And there at dinner, there were a whole lot of people eating, a whole lot of different visitors. He didn't know who was who. And he had heard about the legendary hospitality of this particular house owner. So he turned to the person sitting next to him and he said, tell me, how long have you been staying here? So the person said, I've been staying here for a few days. Turned to the person on the other side and he said, how long have you been staying here? And he said, I've been here for about a week. Then he turned to a third person, not realizing that it was actually the homeowner himself. And he said, and tell me, how long have you been staying here? And he said, I've been staying here for a few years. He said, well, that's already a chutzpah. So that would be an example of what chutzpah means, to have a real cheek. And the Talmud tells us that there are a number of things that are going to happen in the run-up to the coming of the Messiah. For example, there are going to be changes in weather patterns. There's going to be incredible inflation. And one of the things that's going to increase is chutzpah. People are going to have an incredible amount of chutzpah. And the Aruch HaShulchan, one of the famous halachic works of the 19th century, explains to us what exactly is this chutzpah that's going to increase in the run-up to the Messiah. And he says that it is the chutzpah called by the sages chutzpah klape shmaya, where people have got chutzpah against God. An example of this is in this week's parsha, in Parshat Balak. Balak is the king of Moab. He sees the Jewish people, the Israelites, massing at his borders. They have conquered each and every king in the region, and he's afraid that they're coming for him next, and that he can't deal with them on a military basis because they've destroyed all of the great kings and the leaders, Sichon and Og. But he's heard of Bilam, and Bilam is a prophet, he's a sorcerer, he's an expert curser. And he sends some people off to Bilam, and he says, please come and curse the Jewish people. And Bilam says to the messengers, well, look, I can't go on my own accord, I've got to consult with Hashem. Hashem comes to Bilam in the night, and he says to him, don't go. And Bilam turns around to Hashem and says, well, I'm going anyway. And that's exactly what happens. That a person should have chutzpah klape shmaya. He should have chutzpah against God himself. And says the Aruch HaShulchan, this is what we're going to see in the run-up to the Messiah, that people are going to have chutzpah against God himself. And how will this be manifest when it comes to the Torah? People will learn the Torah, they'll learn a mitzvah, and they'll say, this mitzvah doesn't make sense whatsoever. I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's an incredible amount of chutzpah. Because to truly understand the Torah, do you think you're going to get it the first time? Do you think you're going to get it the second time, or the third time, or even the 10th time? The Torah is incredibly, incredibly deep. And if you don't understand it, the problem is not with the Torah. The problem is with you. And you have to have a little bit of humility. Because sometimes something that bothered you when you were a young child doesn't bother you when you're an adult, because you become more mature and you've learned more. Of course, if you don't learn more, then it's always going to bother you. And this is the type of chutzpah that's going to be prevalent in the runs up to the times of the Messiah. And therefore the Aruch HaShulchan cautions each and every parent, make sure that you raise your children not to have this type of chutzpah. Of course they must question, of course they must ask, but they must also study, and that they must have an incredible sense of respect and honor for the Torah. At the same time, chutzpah is not a bad thing. The Talmud, in fact, tells us that there are a number of very chutzpahdik items in this world, and one of them is the Jewish people. They are called azin. They are very brazen. And this is not meant as an insult. It's in fact meant as a compliment, because the Talmud tells us that in order for us to have received the Torah, we had to be brazen, we had to be strong, we had to be courageous. The Torah requires us to be courageous. The Torah requires us sometimes even to go against Hashem, in the same way that Abraham turned to Hashem when Hashem said he was going to destroy Sodom and Amorah, and he said, Hashem, how could you, the judge of the entire world, how could you kill innocent people? A Jew should have the chutzpah to stand up to Hashem and demand what is right and what is good. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.